Well, good evening. We have somewhat of a smaller crowd here today, so this presentation is going to be about an hour and a half, but we're going to cut it shorter unless you all have a lot of questions. But before we do that, we have various interpreters here, and we're going to go through a process and see if anyone needs any type of interpretation. This is obviously our sign language interpreter. Both of these other ladies are named Martha, so I'll just say, Martha, go ahead.
Mi nombre es Marta, estoy aquí para servirles. Si alguien necesita traducción, favor de decirme. Gracias.
My name is also Martha. Rất vui có thể được đến quý vị. Không biết là ở đây có ai cần dịch tiếng Việt không ạ?
Thank you. Since we're not going to need an interpreter tonight, you ladies are invited to leave if you'd like to, okay? Okay. So we tested these mics for about an hour this afternoon, and they worked perfectly. So what can I say? Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, my name is G.K. Manius. I'm the county administrator, and I'll be doing most of the presentation tonight. First of all, let me say welcome to this educational forum. And one of the things that we'd like to say and need to say is that this is an educational forum. Our goal tonight is to educate you on the hospital district's bond package. It's not an advocacy meeting where we're going to encourage you to either vote for or against. This is simply educational. And so when you hear our remarks, it's only in an educational setting and not an advocacy setting. Before I introduce the gentleman to my right, I'd like to recognize Commissioner J.D. Johnson. Commissioner Johnson, you have been with us for a long time, and we appreciate you inviting us out tonight. This gentleman here is Robert Early. Mr. Early is the CEO of the John Peter Smith or the Tarrant County Hospital District healthcare system. And if there's questions that I'm not able to answer, I'm going to turn to my ally here, and he will answer them for us. Okay, so tonight what we're going to talk about is the bond package. And I want to tell you a little story or a little process on how we got to this point. Several years ago, the hospital district came forward and wanted to conduct a bond election. And we developed materials and what we thought were the things that the district needed. And as we took these programs out to the public, and we had a meeting here, along with in 4 other areas of the county, we began to talk to citizens just like yourself and to explain what we wanted to do. And at that point, the audience said, you know, that's a good idea, but there are other things that we need to do also and we want to see. And listening to the audience, we realized that there was a need for us to take a step back and to reanalyze what should be in a bond package that we're going to ask you, the citizens, the voters of Tarrant County, to cast your ballot on. And so in about 1.5 years ago, maybe a little bit more, not quite 2 years ago, the Commissioner's Court decided that it was better that we create a committee, and a committee that was not made up of elected officials or representatives from the hospital district, but a committee that was made up of the citizens of Tarrant County. And so we have 5 members on the Commissioner's Court. Each court member appointed 2 members to that committee, and the court as a whole appointed 2 co-chairs. So we had a committee of 12. And we also had representatives, 2 representatives from the Hospital District Board of Managers and 2 representatives from the County Commissioners Court. They served as advisory to the committee, and we actually charged the committee to do various things. And the name of that committee was the Citizens Blue Ribbon Committee. You might have heard of their activities. Before I go into what their charge was, let me describe the committee in just briefly. It was absolutely amazing, the membership of that committee. It was not a homogeneous group at first. In fact, it represented all aspects, socioeconomic aspects and other aspects of the county, different political aspects and opinions. And quite frankly, as we started that, I myself had a concern that I didn't know we were going to be able to reach consensus at all because of the various opinions. But that was good, because we wanted to have a wide spectrum of individuals who would truly analyze the needs of healthcare in Tarrant County as a whole, and also the role of how JPS would play in that in the delivery of the healthcare system. So the charge of the committee was really twofold. One was to take a futuristic view of what healthcare and the delivery of healthcare in the county would be. And it wasn't just of what JPS would provide, but a more holistic view of what the county was going to look like. And we talked about not just a 5-year or a 10-year outlook, but we asked them to actually look 15, 20 years down the road. And the reason that we did this was simply because Tarrant County is one of the fastest growing counties in the United States. We currently have 2.1 million people in our county. It's estimated that within the next 20 years that we will have an additional 1 million people. So we believe that in 20 years, our population is going to be about 3.1 to 3.4 million people. We also know that the demographics of the county are changing. With more people, there's going to be a need for different types and a greater need for certain types of medical care. You know, we live in a world of an aging population. And as we get older, our healthcare needs are going to change. That changes the dynamics as to what type of healthcare should be available to our community. We then began to ask the question, once we look at the whole healthcare vision of the county, then what role could or should the hospital district play in the delivery of that health care? I can tell you right now that there is not one hospital system that can solely provide all the health care for this county. It is going to take an absolute coordinated effort of the private not-profit hospitals, the for-profit hospitals, and the public hospitals if we're going to attempt to meet the needs of our citizens. So that was the charge of the committee. In February of this year, the committee came back to the court. And by the way, the committee met every 3 weeks, and they were almost every one of them attended all the meetings and went through all the field trips and did all the analysis. And we hired actually 2 nationwide consulting firms that are highly reputable firms to help the committee come up with its conclusions. So in February of this year, the Blue Ribbon Committee came to the Commissioners Court and to the Board of Managers of the hospital, and they presented their findings. And the committee was unanimous on their findings, and they had 5 recommendations as it related to what role JPS should play. And that's what we're here to talk about, because since that time, the Commissioners Court has done additional analysis on those 5 issues, And by the way, the total cost of implementing all 5 of those initiatives was about $1.2 billion, which is a lot of money. And the hospital district has not had a bond package for 35 years or 33 years, since 1985. And so there was a great need. So the Commissioners Court looked at not only the recommendations, but the cost factors of that, and made some decisions and some determinations as to how we would go forward. And what the court talked about was, first of all, we knew that the $1.2 billion was a number that if we had to build everything brand new. And the court has a track record of ensuring that as they spend money, that they do it in the most efficient way that they can. And the first thing that came from the Commissioners Court was, we are not going to engage in a bond package that results in an increase in the tax rate. And so they were very clear to say that any bond package that they would support would be one where there would be a 0 tax rate increase. And that's what these numbers are built upon. So they also said, hospital district, over a 10-year period, how much money do you think that you can bring to the table to help offset some of these costs? And the hospital district did their due diligence, and the district is a large operation. It's a very large operation. And they believe that over a 10-year period, the district could bring up to $300 million to the table. The court then said, okay, if that money will be available over a 10-year period, what other things can we do to lessen the load, if you will, the cost of these projects? The court watches the budgets of not only the county, but also of the hospital district, and they felt, and we agreed, that while the cost of the facilities brand new would be a certain amount, that we could create greater efficiencies and bring in and meet those 5 objectives that the Blue Ribbon Committee had identified, and at a cost less than 1.2. Unfortunately, we don't know exactly how much savings we can generate. I will tell you though, and I will guarantee you that every day that we work on this package, that we're going to try, and I know we're going to be successful in lowering that cost as much as possible. So the court came to the conclusion that they would ask the voters if in fact they would support a debt service of up to $800 million. Now, that's number up to. That does not mean at all that the court will go up to the $800 million, but we thought that was a good number, and because of the reputation and the conservatism that's on the court, that number would be sufficient to address the 5 needs, and really 6 needs, that the Blue Ribbon Committee had come up with. And so I want to walk you through a few slides, and then as we go along, if you have any questions, you can ask them during the presentation, or at the end, if you have any questions, then we will answer them at that time also. So we covered a lot of this already, excuse me, but the bond proposition will be on the November 2018 election. That's on November 6th. Early voting starts October 22nd. And you will find this proposition, and it's a single proposition. It'll be the first proposition on the ballot, which means that it will be after all the individual races. So you'll get to vote for or against whoever you want in a political office, and immediately after that you'll need to make sure that you go to close to the bottom of the ballot, and there you'll find this proposition. As we talked about, the Commissioners Court was emphatic that this bond package would be a no tax rate increase bond package. In fact, if you look at the tax rates of both the hospital district and the county, the hospital district's tax rate has gone down over the past 15 years. The county's rate has gone down significantly also. In fact, over the last 3 years, the county's tax rate, we have decreased the actual tax rate 4% each of those 3 years. So over the last 3 years, almost a 13% decrease in your tax rate. That tells us two things. It tells us, first of all, that we live in a growing county, but it also, and more importantly, tells you about how conservative the court is and how it tries to hold its expenses to a minimum. One of the things that a lot of people don't realize with the hospital district is that out of all the revenues that are needed to run the hospital district, only about 40% of those revenues come from the property tax. And so we have to make sure that if we're going to fund these programs through the existing tax rate, that we're going to have to be very frugal and very efficient. We believe, with leadership like Mr. Early, that we can accomplish that. So what does that mean? This bond package is going to be a pay-as-you-go bond package. Not all the bonds will be issued at the same time. No bonds will be issued unless an analysis has been conducted and we know for sure that monies from the district can pay for two things, that they can pay for both the construction costs and also the maintenance and operations of those facilities once they're activated and put in place. We believe that we're going to be able to save millions of dollars by doing this. And let me give you a good example. In listening to the citizens on what they thought some of the services that we needed to focus on, one level of service that came to the forefront was mental and behavioral health. And we all know that you can just listen to the news and you can see that we have a mental health problem, not only in Tarrant County, but in this state and in this country. We have to address it in a more efficient way, but we also have to have the resources necessary to address the problem. One of the elements of this bond package is to build a new mental and behavioral health hospital. And so we believe that will actually save us money, and I'll tell you why. Right now, we don't have enough beds to treat all the patients that come to JPS. And because of that, we have to send those patients to private facilities, but JPS has to pay for the entire cost that those facilities charge. It takes about $450 a day if we can provide services at our facility for mental health. It costs about $600 a day if we have to pay for those same services with a private vendor. That $150 a day difference equates to over $9 million that we could save if, in fact, we had enough mental health beds. So this bond proposal, the first element, is the mental and behavioral health hospital. It's very important that it's not just how much money you bring in, but it's how much money you spend. And if we can save in not spending as much, that's money that we can keep and use for other activities. And then finally, we talked about the other element of the Blue Ribbon Committee, and that was to look at the overall health of the community. That's only going to be accomplished if we have a coordinated effort with all the healthcare providers in the county, including public health. And we get away from the point where that people, when they get sick, automatically go to an emergency room. In fact, we would like for them not to get sick at all, but when they begin to feel sick, we'd like for them to go to a clinic, because it's a lot easier to treat an illness that has not become so significant that it requires hospitalization. And part of the elements that are in this package include 4 community health centers, 4 additional community health centers, one located in each of the commissioner's precincts. So precinct 4, we anticipate, would pick up one of these major community health centers. Some quick facts about the hospital district. Every 2.5 seconds, the district provides some type of patient need care. They've treated over 1.2 million patient encounters this past year. They stay busy. They stay very busy. And those numbers over the last 5 years continue to increase. It's been over 33 years since we've had a bond package, and quite frankly, our facilities are old and they're inefficient. We can do better for a lot less cost if we had new facilities. Since 1985, our population has grown by more than 1 million people, and quite frankly, in the next 20 years, we're going to add another 1 million people. This last bullet is something that it's somewhat of a double-edged sword. Tarrant County Hospital District has Tarrant County's only Level 1 trauma center. And so what that means is that if you're involved in an accident, if you're involved in a serious crime where you may be shot or hurt, or if you have a major heart attack, the place that you want to go is to JPS, their emergency room, because you can be guaranteed that when you show up at that door, there is going to be a specialist to treat you for the illness that you came into the door with. Other hospitals don't have that. There's 3 Level 1 trauma centers in Dallas, and there's only one in Tarrant County. I said it was a double-edged sword. It is a great place to go if you are seriously injured. Someone asked me the other day, so if you're involved in an auto accident, where are you going? And I said, there's only one place I want to go, and that's JPS. Commissioner Johnson's doctors in his hospital is JPS. It's not the emergency room. It's for entire scope of medical services that he seeks. There's a lot of people that use JPS because it is an excellent hospital. I said the double-edged sword. Unfortunately, sometimes things happen, and the people that go to the trauma center at JPS, their prognosis isn't good because they are hurt, and sometimes they don't make it. And a good example, every police officer in this county that is shot goes to JPS. Every firefighter that is injured on duty goes to JPS. Unfortunately, 2 weeks ago, there was a police officer that went to JPS because he was shot. He was shot in the head, and he didn't make it. But when you talk to the family of that officer, and we have, they will tell you that they could not have had any better treatment, medical treatment or compassionate treatment, than they received at JPS. And it's because of the dedication of the people at JPS. It's the level of professionalism and the doctors that are available to treat that they can handle these type of situations. We're only able right now to serve about 37% of all the needs of our citizens. Even with this bond package, it's not going to be 100%. If we get up to the point that we can provide services to at least 50% of those in need, then we believe that we're going in the right direction. So you might ask, what about the other 50%? We work with the private nonprofits, with the profit hospitals, and other healthcare providers in an attempt to make sure that there's a place for people to go. And that's one of the strong points that JPS has, and that affiliation and that partnership is what really makes Tarrant County what it is today. One of the things that JPS also provides is a primary training facilities for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals. So what does that mean? If a person goes to medical school and before they go out to either practice solo or any other type of practice, they have to do a residency program. If you go and ask your primary care physician where he went through his or her residency, the vast majority of them in Tarrant County will tell you they went to JPS. JPS has the largest family practice residency program in the United States. And there is a tendency for doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals that receive that type of training that they will stay in the community where they got the training. That's important to us because remember that our population is growing and it will grow by 1 million people in the next 20 years. So this is what the ballot looks like. There is a card on your chair, so you don't need to try to read that. The ballot language is in blue. If you're interested in voting for or against this proposition, make sure you go to the bottom of the ballot and you'll find it. It'll be the first proposition. And then finally, this is what the 5, actually 6 recommendations that the Blue Ribbon Committee recommended. The first one was to expand the mental and behavioral health facilities. We've talked about that. We want to make sure that we update our hospital facilities because they're old, they're antiquated. Quite frankly, it costs more money. If we had a new facility, we could lower our cost per room if we could do that. We need to update our Level 1 Emergency Trauma Center. We always need to keep that as being the state of the art. One of the things that the citizens talked about was an expanded need for cancer care. And this ballot proposition would provide funding for expanded cancer care in the county. We already talked a little bit about the 4 new regional community patient care facilities. The more facilities we have where people can be treated sooner than later, the greater the probability that they're not going to walk into the back of that emergency room. And when they come to the emergency room, that's the most expensive health care at that point. It simply costs a lot of money to maintain an emergency room. Not just a level 1 trauma, but other hospitals also have emergency rooms. That is the most expensive care. So if we can create additional clinics, and by the way, there is a new clinic that's going to be open. The grand opening is October 11th. It's in the northeast part of the county. And these 4 clinics will be modeled after that clinic. It's a state-of-the-art clinic. We're increasing the type of services that will be available in those clinics, and we think it's a good thing. Plus, quite frankly, in this county, we have a public transportation issue where that not all people have a way of traveling downtown Fort Worth to get health care. So if we have these clinics, the travel doesn't need to be as far. And that's important. And we heard that from our listening groups. And then finally, an updated ambulatory outpatient surgical facility. A lot of people don't know what that is. That's the day surgery centers. And why this is important is because if we can expand those types of facilities, then we take a lot of pressure off of the big surgery centers or big surgical rooms that we have in the main hospital and in the trauma center. And that'll allow us to get more people into surgery in the emergency room, and also the ability for people to, if they have day surgery, that they can come in and get it done. So as I said, this bond package is an amount not to exceed $800 million. The election itself will be on November 6th. If you need more information on the bond package, you can go to the county's website and and then click the button. It's Tarrant County Hospital District bond election. And so if you need more information, either go to the website. You can call the Commissioner's office, who will forward you to our offices so we can help you get more information, any information that you desire. The key to this, though, is that it's the JPS bond program is 33 years since the last one. And the Blue Ribbon Committee, and it was supported unanimously by the Commissioners Court and unanimously by the Board of Managers of the hospital district, believe that this is the first step that needs to happen to improve the health care in Tarrant County. And with that, that's my presentation. So if there's any questions that you might have, we'll try to answer those. And if not, we will get the answers for you and to you. So, questions?
Can you go back one slide?
I'll try.
Can you tell us about the continued school-based student health partnership? The fifth bullet down.
The four regional clinics and the continuous school-based student health partnerships? Yes, but I'm going to ask Mr. Early to address that question.
We currently have 19 school-based health clinics, and what we do is we partner with our school districts, and we put a clinic either inside the school or at adjoining land that the school districts provide us. We put nurse practitioners in there, and we see children that have a variety of issues, from the flu to anything else that they might see. Oftentimes, your school nurses are fairly limited in what they can do. Great group of people, but we provide those clinics. And like I said, in the last 11 years, we've grown from, I believe, 3 clinics to 19. And they've been effective for us, and they've been helpful for us. It also, the residual of that, too, is we find a lot of parents, grandparents, guardians starting to go to our adult facilities because their children at school are in our school-based programs. Good question. Thank you.
Other questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, if you have to be taken to one of, if you have to be taken to one of your facilities, how do you get there? I'll give you an example of what happened to me one time. I was working at Tarrant County College at the time. This is about 12 years ago. I cut my finger, and it wasn't a bad cut, but I couldn't get the blood to stop. I went down to the nurse's office. The nurse wasn't there, so they put me in an ambulance, and they took me down to Harris Methodist Hospital, and they sewed up the thumb. And when I got the bill, my insurance company, which was a private insurance company, paid the bill for the fixing of the thumb, but the city of Fort Worth charged over $1,000 to take me 10 miles. And to me, that was a ripoff. In fact, the insurance company said that they would pay for reasonable and customary. So they only paid $300 of the over $1,000 bill that I have. Is there some way that this could be taken care of? I guess from talking to people, it wouldn't happen to me today for one very good reason. The city of Fort Worth would have to deal with the government, and they have a harder time ripping off the government than they do a common, ordinary person.
Well, let me start. I will start to try to answer that question. Public transportation is limited in the county. It's limited to the city of Fort Worth and I believe 2 or 3 other cities. The Commissioners Court is working with other cities to provide some form of transportation for medical purposes and things like this. It's a long process. And our goal, at least in this package, is to have the clinics fairly close so that you don't need to get into an ambulance. You can either get into a taxi or you can get someone to simply drive you a couple of miles to those facilities. That was one of the major reasons that we heard and we included in the bond package the 4 centers. The 4 centers are new centers. We currently have 14 additional centers that we have out. And I don't know if that includes the new one that you're about to open up in.
It does.
It does. Okay, so once we do that, we will have 18 centers across the county to at least make that travel somewhat shorter.
But if you're in a real bad way, you still have to.
Yes. Yeah. Absolutely.
Sir, I can help you with that question.
Please do.
We're delighted you're here.
My wife had an accident at a roller skate ring and broke her. I don't need that. That's all real life. Thank you, though. I appreciate it. My wife had a roller skating accident with my child and broke her ankle, was put in the ambulance, and went 7 miles. And the bill was $2,700. That was just recently. Part of the issue there is MedStar is not a preferred provider for most of the insurance policies. And that's why MedStar offers a program that you can join into MedStar. I think it's like $65 a year, and they cover all that cost.
Yeah.
That's why that program exists. So you can eliminate that concern by joining the MedStar program for $65 a year.
But why are they charging so much?
It's set by the city. It's not set by the county. It's set by the city, the municipality.
The MedStar Saver is with EPAP. It's not with MedStar,
Okay.
but it still covers $69 a year for your family and whoever lives in their household. And that's for lack of better term, it's unlimited coverage.
And I will share with you that I live outside the MedStar community because I live out the rural part of here. But I work in the MedStar community, and my daughter goes to school in the MedStar community. So we joined it just because we spend the majority of our time in the MedStar region.
Yeah.
Well, the thing I have going for me right now is my age. So, the city has to deal with the federal government rather than being able to take advantage of people like you.
But that's the reason the MedStar Saver program exists, is for that.
It's on their website. Just go to the MedStar website and look on the right side of the Star Saver link. And it explains it all to you.
But the fee is set by the city.
Yeah, that program that MedStar runs is a very good program, you know, and everyone says, well, I'm probably not ever going to use it, but believe me, for $70 a year and it covers your family. Yeah, so.
That came along after his situation. We were been there, what, a couple of years? It was like
Okay.
03. And
Well-
this happened. And we were told by the MedStar people that the reason that they charge that is because when their Medicaid customers come, even if they're just coming for a regular visit, they have to take them, and so we had to make up the difference as paying citizens.
I think you're going to find that's probably a common practice. Sir, do you have a question?
With 2.1, I guess it's not on. Is it on?
It is, yes.
Okay. With 2.1 million people in the county, how many unique indigent individuals get treated at JPS? Not visits. How many people? What percentage of that 2.1
What
million
percentage of
qualify as
your
indigent?
Patients are indigent.
Scott, I know you were working on, there's a Scott Rule on staff, and I know Scott has worked on that recently.
Right, and the projections would be, and the way we look at connections membership, so those patients under 250% of federal poverty level, they'll be somewhere between 2.1 million, be somewhere around 400,000 will fit into that 25%.
So 25%, 400,000, and the annual funding that the county gives to JPS is $408 million. That seems like a lot.
Well, what you are dealing with though is everybody that comes into JPS. So you're dealing with any population that comes in and cannot afford its bill, and anybody else that comes into the organization as well.
But that was the 400,000 he mentioned, wasn't it?
400,000 are going to be at that level, but we're going to see. I have no idea how many indigent individuals are going to come through our front door in any given year.
Okay. Next question. If non-emergency patients are presenting to emergency rooms and that's where they get extremely expensive care given. Do we have, or why don't we have, low-cost clinics affiliated with an emergency room?
We do, and we try really hard to deal with that. In fact, we've gotten very aggressive about an urgent care facility by which we defer a lot of people out of our emergency room. The challenge with it is when you present in an emergency room, you still have to be triaged and you still have to be decided as to which direction you would go. So even if an individual comes in and is not an emergency patient and might be urgent, or even not an urgent patient, but just coming in for renewal of their meds, they still have to be worked up. We still have to get the information, and you're going to spend a minimum of oftentimes 15 to 30 minutes per patient just in that time alone. So we don't have an ability for you to walk in and say, you're urgent care. We still have to work you up, and we still have to have a bevy of doctors that are going to see you when you come in that front door to make that determination. And some of it's hard. The other thing that's very difficult is the challenge that you have between an emergency patient that is clinical and medical in their nature and an emergency patient that is psychotic and a behavioral health facility as well.
So we do have a full-sized, low-cost clinic available at the JPS emergency room?
We have an urgent care facility at JPS, and we have...
Does that mean something different than what I stated? What is an urgent care facility?
Urgent care is going to be somebody that is in urgent need of that care, not an emergency need. So I don't know that I would use your term about the low-cost aspects of it, but it's certainly better than the cost that you would deal with in an emergency room. And we also have a psychiatric emergency room as well. So those are the three areas that people are going to go at JPS. You're going to go to an urgent care facility, which is located on the premises, emergency care facility, or a psychiatric emergency care facility.
Now, consistently, when we talk about medical care, we always hear we have to do something different because emergency rooms are too expensive. It doesn't sound like we've really attacked that and made a low-cost clinic available in that regime. And so we have to do all sorts of other things at other locations other than the emergency room. And again, this is always the number one issue. Well, if you present to the emergency room, it's going to cost you 10 to 100 times more than if you had gone to a clinic. And I grew up, when I got sick, we went down and pulled the little paper from the barber number, and it said, "Your number 150 to be seen, please wait, and then you'll get seen." And it doesn't seem to me that that is deemed acceptable care for people today, although it certainly was when I was growing up.
Well, let me. One of the reasons we wanted the additional clinics was that we wanted to make sure that people's health never it would slow down the number of people whose health would deteriorate so much that their needs could only be satisfied in the emergency room. We talked a little bit about, at the very beginning, about the two-pronged effort to keep the community healthier. Well, keeping the community healthier means that if you have an illness, that you can go to a clinic and have that illness treated and cured at that point, rather than simply sitting at home, not taking care of yourself until you get so sick that the care that you need is going to be in an emergency room. The only way you're going to get down to that emergency room is if you call 911, they're going to put you in an ambulance, and they're going to deliver you to either JPS emergency, to THR emergency, or anyone else. And at that point, that emergency room has to treat you. They do not have the flexibility of saying, no, we're not going to treat you, because by federal law, they have to treat you. What Robert was saying was that they have an urgent care facility right by our emergency room, because that way, if it's determined that it's not serious enough to be admitted through the emergency room, they can divert you over to a clinic that'll treat you at that point.
Let me tell you the other issue that is helpful in these situations, and it's not probably the lifestyle that you have led, and I'm hopeful that you didn't, but oftentimes we will see patients that have not seen any medical care facility in 20 years or 30 years. So when they present to our emergency room with whatever the situation is, we'll find the comorbidities that they have, and we're dealing with 4 or 5 different issues. That's where a significant cost comes in. If we can create an environment where we have a much stronger primary care system by which you're seen much earlier in the process of your health frailties, then you can deal with that issue much better than you can when it is a over time period of 5 different issues that we're trying to solve for in the emergency room. Because then you talk about increased length of stay and significant more challenges.
Well, that's obviously true. How do you affect the mindset of the individual that says, I don't like doctors, I'm not going to doctors? You're not going to change that,
the
are
way
you?
you affect that mindset is the same people that say, I don't like doctors, are still coming into the emergency room. Because there's going to be some days you just can't function.
Sure.
So the key to that is, in my opinion, is the primary care facility that has ease of access, that people can get into quickly and easily and be able to still get back to work or still be able to function properly in their world. That is a key, and that's going to be a major key not only in Tarrant County, it's going to be in the United States healthcare system.
How do our 19 satellite facilities not provide that today?
We do, well, the 19 you're referring to is our school-based program, and then the 14 primary care facilities do. But with the ever-increasing population of Tarrant County, it's hard to handle all that we can in those facilities. So what we're trying to do is 2 things. One, we're trying to create greater access in a community that has transportational needs that are challenging. And the second thing is we want that clinic that you go to be able to serve as much as we possibly can. Our hope is that a woman comes in for a woman wellness exam and she has a 4-year-old and she gets pediatric care for her 4-year-old, and she takes her husband by the ear and brings him in and he gets his care, and all of a sudden I got 3 people getting care at one time for the convenience of that. That's the goal of what we want to try to be able to do. Instead of going to 4 different clinics or 3 different clinics or 2 different healthcare systems, that's not what you want.
And your 14 clinics don't provide that today?
They do provide that today. We're advancing them, and we're trying to put everything we can into those individual clinics. To what Mr. Mania spoke about on the October 11th opening of that facility, you'll see many more services there than what we had previously put into those facilities. We're trying to make them bigger and better so that it can create that access model, so that we'll see less. The other thing is trying to monitor those people that go to those clinics and then show up in the emergency later on and figure out what that cup and lip is and where they're missing and where our challenges are. That is a true key to American healthcare, and that's the access to the primary care.
Other questions?
Thanks for your question.
Yes, ma'am.
Understanding then, if someone is taken to JPS, they can't choose to go in the urgent care door versus the emergency door. They have to go over here first.
No, they can go where they think, but where they are going to go, if they show up in the emergency room, and that's mostly where people go because that's what their mindset is, they see the sign that says emergency and they go there. We help direct them to the other places once we make that determination for them.
You have to go through all that process, which is an expensive process.
And you do, yes ma'am, you do have to do that, and that's what we have to do to make sure that you're taken care of. We would hate to make a quick determination and you show up in an urgent care when you really need to be in an emergency care, and vice versa.
It seems like it would be easier to go the other way and then say, you're a little too bad for us, push you over here.
And that does happen as well. It does. But again, I think the mindset of people is I'm going to go to the emergency room. And that's a challenge for us. And everybody else, all the emergency rooms of Tarrant County and throughout the nation have the same issues.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I just want to make a comment that maybe some education on with regard to urgent care versus emergency. Frankly, I don't know the difference, and I was just always associated one word with the other.
I'll give you a layman's definition, and this was the definition given to me, and again, you're hearing it through me, and I'm a layman in this. It's not a clinical definition. But if I've got a severed arm and I'm bleeding profusely, obviously I'm an emergency care patient. If I've got an arm that doesn't function well, or I can't lift it, or the pain is so great, it may well be urgent. I am not in a life-threatening situation. If my arm is not taken care of, it is an inconvenience, it is painful, it hurts, but I'm not dying from that, and I will not have a blood loss or a difficulty that causes that. Emergency care is going to be, you need that care and you need it now. So that's the difference, and then you obviously have your trauma care as well. And that's going to be an issue where oftentimes you're going to have people that aren't even in a position to communicate, and they're coming in.
But your suggestion is a very good suggestion, that we as a whole should better define emergency versus urgent care. Yes, sir.
I believe that one of these regional health centers will be built nearby, I believe in White Settlement here on the west side of the county.
Certainly a possibility. That's one area that we're definitely looking at. And again, we want to try to put those clinics in the place where you're going to see the population increase that's most conducive to that population is going to need those clinics so we can reduce travel.
So this area, this part of the county and Lake Worth will benefit greatly from this.
Yes, it will.
Yes, sir. I would totally agree.
Yes, sir. Other questions? Okay, well then, let me say thank you very much for coming. We have one more question. One more question.
Just add one more thing. Thank you very much. Very good presentation, but more than that, great work that was put into the plan on you and a lot of people that put the work into this. I live here. I'm a resident of Azle, Tarrant County, and work in the area. I'm the president of one of the hospitals here in the county, and just want to say JPS is a tremendous resource to all of us in the county, and I'm behind it, we're behind it, and there's not a big crowd here tonight, but I hope everyone will go home and tell your neighbors to get out and support this. This will be a benefit for all of us in the county.
Thank you very much.
One other question.
Thank you. Well, I too live in Tarrant County. I've been a resident of Tarrant County for 32 years, a resident of Haslett for 29 years, and a 4-term mayor in Haslett. So I've seen Tarrant County and this whole area change over time, both in the population and just we as a society. And I commend the Commissioner's Court and how this was conducted and how this whole program is addressing distributed health care throughout the county. And I wholly agree that is a method of delivery for the future. As well as having the level of expertise at the primary hospital is comforting to me to know that we have that capability here in Tarrant County. But I want to commend the Commissioner's Court on how this was conducted and the program was put together, and I commend JPS as well. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no other questions or comments, well then, thank you for coming tonight, and I hope you have a great evening.